everyone, I'm Betsy.
And I'm Greg.
And we want to invite you to check out our podcast, Going on 30.
Each month, Betsy and I take a look back at a movie that was released 30 years ago that was either nominated or should have been nominated for Best Picture.
We talk about the legacy of the film, choose the best scenes and performances, and explore our own hot takes about the movie.
And we discuss the greatness of Tom Cruise, an actor who has graced our screens for multiple decades, taking on some of the most artistically challenging pursuits while displaying what can only be described as an everyman relatability. An actor, nay, a thespian, who pushes the boundaries of what the medium is capable of while revealing the humanity that's underlying.
All right, I'm done. I cannot tolerate this anymore. So listen to Going on 30 every month right here on the Popping Collars feed, wherever you get your podcasts.
I love you, Tom!
Oh, jeez.
Hi, I'm Greg Knight.
Hey, I'm Ryan Parker.
And this is PCTV, a Popping Collars side project where we randomly select current TV show that you should be streaming right now. Ryan and I have each picked 6 shows from the top streaming apps, including Netflix, Hulu, Disney+, Max, rebrand, drop the HBO. We're down to Max now. Prime Video and Apple TV.
Do you like Max?
That's right. That's right.
Do you care? Does anybody care?
I gotta say, when I first heard it, I was like, "Oh, it felt like they were leaning into the Cinemax side rather than the HBO side."
The thing that's made them wagons full of money.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Well, it's we're talking about Max for a reason because
that's
the
right.
show that we're discussing.
That's right, because this month
currently streaming on Max.
We are talking about the Max series, The Last of Us.
If you don't think there's hope for the world, why bother going on?
You haven't seen the world, so you don't know. You keep going for family.
I'm not family.
No. You're cargo.
Why are you so important?
Somewhere out west, they're working on a cure. I think what really impressed them was the fact that I didn't turn into a monster.
If she so much as twitches, don't.
Okay.
If I'm taking you with me, you do what I say when I say it. You got any advice on the best way west?
Yeah, go east. If you come this far, then you know what's out there.
You're not gonna scare us.
Scared him?
You have a greater purpose than any of us could have ever imagined.
Be careful who you put your faith in.
It might not be her father, but you were someone's.
You trust me?
The Last of Us is based on the critically acclaimed video game series for PlayStation. I've played both games. So there's Last of Us and The Last of Us Part 2.
Mm-hmm.
They are among some of the most compelling games ever made in their aesthetic and in their storytelling, which is clearly on display here in this series. A series that is based on a brutally violent game in which you're as a character, you're controlling multiple characters over both games, you're asked to make very hard decisions. And of course, there are things where you're forced to make hard decisions because the game doesn't continue if you don't.
Right.
You're frequently gunning down, for lack of a better word, zombies, which were formerly, sentient beings, human beings, who have now morphed into these strange fungi look like creatures. And also, I should say, the games are incredibly terrifying.
Yeah.
It's turn all the lights on, play in the morning kind of thing for me anyway, because I just immerse myself in these games. All that to say, I don't think the series is any of that. Like, the series is much quieter for a zombie show. There aren't a lot of zombies. I don't have a problem with that. And there are one or two departures from the game that I think one of which we'll talk about in detail.
Yeah.
But I think what they've done here, and we won't spend the whole time comparing to the video game, but the seed of the video game is very much the relationship between Joel and Ellie.
Right.
And the series on Max just pumps that full of steroids.
Yeah, it has to, because it has like 7 hours to tell this story.
Yeah. So that's kind of where we are logistically. That's what we're talking about.
Exactly.
Kind of show it an adaptation of a video game property.
So let me do a little bit of table setting, plot synopsis wise, which, like all of our plot synopsis coming from IMDb, is ridiculously sort of low. And I think you've filled in a lot of this. But the description is this: after a global pandemic destroys civilization, a hardened survivor takes charge of a 14-year-old girl who may be humanity's last hope. So it's Lone Wolf and Cub, right? I mean, that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah. Good comparison.
Yeah. If you've ever seen what? The Mandalorian, you know what we're talking about.
But also, it just happens to be adapted for television by Craig Mazin, who Max fans, HBO fans, will know from Chernobyl.
Yeah, absolutely. To sort of flesh this out a little bit more, it's a road picture too. I mean, it's a road trip game. So the way that the video game is laid out, which I think you did a great job of describing it, is, this post-apocalyptic world that they're surviving in, but they have to move from Boston to Colorado or Wyoming,
Colorado,
something like that.
Yeah, out west.
So they've got to traverse the United States basically, and so you can almost tell how this goes, right? Like each chapter of the game is them moving, ever more west. And that's kind of how the show works also, right? Like each episode of the show, they're moving further and further west, and you get a glimpse of what the world is around them. So yeah, so it's a bit of a road trip. It's a bit of a zombie picture, and it's a bit of a found family. What does it mean to be a parent, and how does that work in a world that doesn't have any more rules?
You talked about in some of our prep, and I may put you on the spot here and ask you why you think so, but this comes on the heels not too long after another post-apocalyptic pandemic series in Station 11, itself an adaptation of another work. And I want to ask you why you think you mentioned that you felt Station 11 functioned better as kind of a pandemic narrative, and I wonder why that is. But one of the things I do think that The Last of Us does as entertainment and as kind of maybe real world commentary in the oh crap, could this happen one day kind of thing, is talking about climate change and the way evolution works in terms of viruses and how they may begin to evolve beyond our ability to fight them. And that's one of the things that I liked about the series. And they don't really spend a lot of time on this and kind of beat that dead horse. It's really just a way of setting the table, as you would say, of how this came about, of how this happened. And I think it's the first scenes of the first 2 episodes. They don't do it every episode, but I thought those were particularly entertaining and chilling as well, especially the one, I believe it's in the Philippines, where the scientist says, bomb the whole city.
Right.
It's on the eve of the outbreak. What should we do? How can we contain it? And she said, bomb the whole city. And so I thought that was kind of cool. And then, of course, it throws us into the road trip with Joel and Ellie, because there's a fast forward that happens. And
yeah, all of that sort of God's eye view stuff, the let's take a step back and look at this from long range. That feels very much like Craig Mazin Chernobyl stuff, right?
No, mankind has been at war with the virus from the start. Sometimes millions of people die, as in an actual war, but in the end, we always win.
But you, just to be clear, you do think microorganisms pose a threat?
Oh, in the most dire terms.
Bacteria?
No.
You like saying no?
Yes.
Not bacteria, not viruses, so...
Fungus. Yes, that's the usual response. Fungi seem harmless enough. Many species know otherwise, because there are some fungi who seek not to kill, but to control. Let me ask you, where do we get LSD from?
Where do you get it from?
It comes from ergot, a fungus. Psilocybin, also a fungus. Viruses can make us ill, but fungi can alter our very minds. There's a fungus that infects insects, gets inside an ant, for example, travels through its circulatory system to the ant's brain, and then floods it with hallucinogens, thus bending the ant's mind to its will. The fungus starts to direct the ant's behavior, telling it where to go, what to do, like a puppeteer with a marionette. And it gets worse. The fungus needs food to live, so it begins to devour its host from within, replacing the ant's flesh with its own. But it doesn't let its victim die, no. It keeps its puppet alive by preventing decomposition. How? Where do we get penicillin from?
Fungus. Dr. Schoenheis, you're in distress.
Fungal infection of this kind is real, but not in humans.
True, fungi cannot survive if its host's internal temperature is over 94 degrees. And currently, there are no reasons for fungi to evolve to be able to withstand higher temperatures. But what if that were to change? What if, for instance, the world were to get slightly warmer? Well, now, there is reason to evolve. One gene mutates, and an Ascomycetia, Candida, ergot, Cordyceps, Aspergillus, any one of them could become capable of burrowing into our brains and taking control, not of millions of us, but billions of us. Billions of puppets with poisoned minds, permanently fixed on one unifying goal: to spread the infection to every last human alive by any means necessary. And there are no treatments for this, no preventatives, no cures. They don't exist. It's not even possible to make them.
So if that happens,
we lose.
Like that feel like
Good
let's
point.
bring in an
Yes.
expert to give us, their opinion of what should happen. Oh, destroy it all because
Yeah.
you've wrecked everything. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
So why do you think Station 11 works better? And I don't think you're necessarily saying this is a bad show.
Oh, no. This
What's,
is a great show. So I picked this show. Yeah, this
Yeah.
is my max pick for our little enterprise here. And the reason that I picked it is because it is a phenomenon. Like it's a very well received show, which in itself is sort of an oddity in the video game genre, and we'll unpack that a little bit more later. But the reason that I think Station 11 works better is because it has sort of similar themes, right? So it has an orphaned child and a foster parent dynamic that's at the heart of it. The issue, though, in Station 11 is that there's a separation that happens between the two of them, and they have to come back together again at some point. And the payoff for that coming back together is just it's breathtaking the way that it happens on that show. My issue with dystopian dramas is why would anybody live in this world? Like, that's always my first question is, and I get it, like there's a biological need to like survive and stuff, but eventually, like if your life is only survival and not thriving, this is not a world to live in, right? This is the worst. And Station 11 does a better job than The Last of Us, just because it's a totally different narrative of showing me a reason to live in a world that's suffered as much loss and grief and damage as the sort of dystopian worlds that we see. The Last of Us has one episode, which we're going to talk a lot about, that does show what it means for people to thrive in this world. But the rest of it is just, it's a little bleaker than I would hope to see.
I think
because I just kind of need hope, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at.
I think that's a very fair question, especially and comment, especially when we talk about hitting the reset button, which maybe humanity needs to take a break for a while,
right?
And let the earth heal or evolve or what have you. And I think you're right. I've always joke with people. I'm like, would we rush to cannibalism that quickly? Like, yeah. Do you know what I mean? It's like, oh, a year later we're eating each other. Maybe, I don't know. But I agree with you 100%. And I haven't thought about it in quite that way. And your point about Station 11, it's achingly beautiful. And even in its kind of dystopian atmosphere, there's something there's worth striving for. It feels like the show's asking us to believe in that. The best that we see maybe outside of the episode we want to talk about, is that community at the end in Colorado that seems to have put the town back together. But, it made me think of what it must feel like to exist in that world. There's a great book called A Canticle for Leibowitz. I don't know if you know this book. I think it's one of the greatest American novels ever written. Mm-hmm. And it's a post-apocalyptic narrative that takes place thousands of years after the inciting incident. And it focuses on this group of monks in the desert who are attempting to kindle the flame of civilization. Yeah. And they have a library and they have sacred orders, but their sacred orders are based off of an old shopping cart list, like an old grocery list. But they think there's some sort of mythology at work to it. So what they're trying to do is recreate what once was. Like, old TV sets are like planters now. Like, nothing is used as it was intended.
Right.
But you have this group of monks who the best that they could ever do is remake what once was. And I wonder if there's a little bit of that in The Last of Us, especially in that town in Colorado where, it's just a pale imitation of like a thriving city.
The only reason that I'm comparing Station 11 to The Last of Us is that these are two dystopian shows that HBO released kind of back to back. That's the only thing that they really have in common, right?
Yeah.
But, it feels like the world of The Last of Us is so far away from having a traveling Shakespearean play sort of coming through town. Yeah. And I would rather see the dystopia where we're trying to reclaim our art and our ability to to do plays for each other and to make art for each other and to rebuild what makes being a human being important. Right. Yeah. So let's talk about adaptations just really quickly, because I think this is a key point for me when I think about this show and when I think about Station 11. So just one last comment on Station 11 now, which is to say that when that show was adapted for HBO, they changed the book. They changed a lot of aspects of the book. They took the basic structure of the story, but like, for instance, they had characters that reconnected. And I mentioned it already, Jeevan and Kirsten reconnecting at the end of the TV show. That doesn't happen in the book. Like, Jeevan gets her out of Chicago, but then they never see each other again. Yeah. And so, the beauty of that sort of reunion, I thought, was necessary for the television show. Like, so what if it's not in the book? The show kind of dictates that it needs to happen. And so I'm glad that the creators made it happen, right? similarly, The Last of Us, it really does hit a lot of the major beats of the video game with one clear, just absolute clear diversion, in my opinion, which is the Frank and Bill story, which plays out a lot more cynical, I think, in the game, and barely really warrants a whole lot of talking about. And yet this television show devotes an entire episode and an extended episode to what it means to find love at the end of the world. And I think it's such a departure, but it's just a necessary departure for you to buy into the show, I think.
That episode feels like so far and above everything else in the series.
Yeah.
That it's almost like it's from a different series. And I think you're right about how do you find love when you're worried that that stranger coming through the gate wants to eat you or steal from you. And as two of the better performances, would you think guest star supporting actor nominees, in the next Emmys? I don't know what else to say about it that a lot of people probably haven't already said. It's beautiful. I mean, it's tender and it's sweet and it's funny and it's hopeful. And I don't know. I watched it and you think, well, what a life,
Right.
like what a life. Like, and it's rare that you get to have that kind of reaction to a single episode of a series.
And the other thing that it does, which I really appreciate too, as far as this idea of adaptation, is that it plays with your familiarity with the actors themselves, right? So like it plays off of the understanding that you see Nick Offerman and you think of Ron Swanson. And so you think you know who this character is, and it's not that. It's something else, right? It has a little bit of that, but it's a wholly different person. And the same thing with Murray Bartlett. It plays off of this idea of like, I mean, you would have just seen him in The White Lotus. And so this idea of like pulling these ideas that you have of these guest actors and then switching them around and mixing them up and creating like this amazing sort of relationship, but also this sort of mini world in the space of the entire show. I just think that's amazing. It's really good adaptation. That's what I think I'm trying to sort of stress with this show, is that to adapt something doesn't mean to do panel by panel exactly what the source material says. To adapt something is to take the spirit of it and to tell maybe a different story, but something that gets at the heart of what the original thing was trying to say, but maybe saying it in a different way, right?
Maybe
like
saying
a remix.
it better. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think you're, I'm trying to remember watching it, because I watched it week by week, thinking, oh, what else are they going to do? And they do this to a bit, right? Because I think it's a departure from the game. When Ellie and her friend Riley go to the mall.
Yeah. So that's like downloadable content. So not in the original game, but you could download that part of the story.
So, I thought that was quite good. But it had me thinking, okay, who else will they do this with? And they really don't. I mean, they continue the journey westward, as you mentioned earlier, that kind of sticks to the structure of the game.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, the episode, it's when you think about Nick Offerman, if you've read any of his work or just know anything about him as a person, I mean, he is someone with a great love of the outdoors and a bit of a craftsman in his own right. So to watch him in the setting to try to, make a way out of no way, in a sense, there are these layers to it, as you've pointed out, that it's so effective.
Yeah, I love that it comes in episode 3 of the show, because it helps frame for us as the audience, because, at this point, Ellie and Joel really don't have much of a relationship, and we don't really understand what their relationship is. But by structuring this episode the way that it is, and by taking us away from our main characters for just a second, what it shows us is that it's possible for the people that we're following on the show, it's possible for them to have love for each other as well. obviously not the same kind of love that Frank and Bill have for each other, but they can learn how to be like a father and a daughter as they make it across, America here. And I think that that's like giving us a glimpse that, you know what, these human relationships that we've come to depend on for millennia are still possible, even when everything is broken down. I think it's helpful to show that early on in the series, because you're going to have to go through the valley of death to get to that relationship, by the end of the show.
You've got me thinking about this concept of relationships, of kind of traditional family ties versus blended or alternate ties, right? Like Joel and Ellie have a bond. Joel and Tommy can't stay together, right? And they're brothers.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with anybody in, the camp in, is Philly, right? At the start.
Boston,
excuse me. It's the same with the camp in Boston and the dysfunction you see there. And it's interesting to me that maybe it's the reality that when everything falls apart, you kind of get to choose who you want to be family with.
Like Joel and Tess are lovers, but they can't even admit to themselves like what their relationship is to each other. It's like they're intimate with each other, but they're cold to each other at the same time. It's almost like they can't grasp like what the concept is anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. And meanwhile, on the other hand, you have Bill and Frank who can.
Yeah, who fall in love. Yeah.
Are warm. Yeah, with each other. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, again, like that episode, it's a masterpiece. I think there's nothing that we can really say that, would give it all the superlatives that it deserves.
You could in relationship counseling, you could be like, just watch this show. Here's one session of marriage therapy or premarital counseling. Just watch this episode.
Right. Yeah. And
to be in relationship with, this is what long-term commitment looks like.
Yeah. This is
living life together.
Yeah. You have to communicate with each other.
Eat some fruit, communicate. Yeah. In fact, I've got to officiate a wedding this summer, and I think I'm going to text the couple now and say, which I know they've watched it, so they're big to me.
So speaking of the Frank and Bill episode, what is your best scene, sequence, episode, or storyline from the show?
Yeah, I mean, I think that episode, and then I want to go back to the sequence and just reiterate that kind of opening, as you pointed out, Craig's God's eye view of how this has come to be. So chilling, and I just thought it set a great tone for the whole series in that way. So yeah, I mean, episode 3, but scene or sequence may have been that one, and then maybe when Ellie goes ham on that corrupt preacher man.
Yeah.
What about you?
So for me, I think it's Frank and Bill's last moments. Right.
Okay.
It's that hour of last things that they have together, which, as someone who has, lost loved ones, and I think a lot of us understand, having just come through COVID and just the experience of grief and loss that so many families around the country have experienced over the last few years. Like this idea to be able to send someone off in a loving and respectful way, it's a luxury that is rarely afforded to most people.
Yeah, didn't it? Yeah.
It's and when you see it happen, it is just so lovely, because it's a life well lived, and you close your eyes and you go to sleep and you never wake up again, and it's just amazing. It's what you would wish everyone could experience as their last moments. Yeah.
Why are there already pills in the bottle?
Enough to kill a horse. This isn't the tragic suicide at the end of the play. I'm old. I'm satisfied. And you were my purpose.
I do not support this. Oh, I should be furious. But from an objective point of view, it's incredibly romantic. Take me to bed.
I totally agree with you, though, about the cold open, especially to the first episode, where I'm just like screaming at my TV. I'm like, dude, the guy from The Mummy is like scaring the hell out of me with this mushroom talk, man.
What is this? They're taking over. They're evolving.
Like, it's the way he says it, just so matter of factly. Like, you know, it like there's nothing you can do. Like, it's over. You know, and it's just like it's that sort of. I mean, we call it a cold open, but it's also a cold reminder that like the universe owes us nothing. You know, like a gamma wave that started deep in space just washes over the Earth, and everything is dead. You know. And it's just, we can't anticipate it. We can't see it. We can't predict that it could happen. You know, it's like anything can happen at any moment. And it's just, it really helps you to appreciate that, like, we are living by grace.
We're nothing. I don't do this much anymore, but after that scene, I ran wherever Amy was in the house. I like physically grabbed her and put her on the couch and was like, watch this first 5 minutes.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah.
Best performance?
For me, best performance is hands down Melanie Linsky in this, who you probably know from Yellow Jackets, which she's on right now. She was also in the Leonardo DiCaprio movie, Don't Look Up.
She was also in Togetherness on HBO.
I mean, she's like one of these character actors that if you just need like a normal looking person who's also a phenomenal actor, like this, Melanie Linsky is who you get, right? And so
I would watch her read the phone book.
Oh my God, she's amazing.
She's beautiful. She's insanely talented.
Yeah.
I bet she's so fun and funny. Like,
oh, absolutely.
In real life, but she often plays these very complex, dark is the wrong word, but she doesn't get a lot of straight comedy.
Yeah. I mean, she does get cast in like the housewife role a lot. But anyway, so in this show, she plays this woman who, you know, who's good at one thing, which is setting things right in her town. And she, you know, we keep talking about the coldness of the show, but she does it in just such a cold and methodical way that it's chilling, and it's not personal for her necessarily. Although towards the end, it does kind of feel personal because it's about her brother and stuff. But it's almost as if like the chair of the PTA just became like the head of a rebellion army. You know, it's like, or like you know, what's a like Blackwater or something. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, like it's like a military group.
It's like, what skills did this person show in their regular life before all of this happened? Because she seems like, you know, an iron-fisted despotic leader, you know, of Kansas City. And yet, like, what, 20 years before that, she was probably just, you know, just on the PTA or something. Yeah, I mean, it's just
making
hard
cookies.
It's hard to anticipate. Yeah.
I wonder if this is the cell where my brother was beaten to death.
Oh, you were wronged. And I'm sorry. But this has gone too far. It has to stop.
It has to stop now, you mean? Now that you're in the cell. But before, people dying was okay. When you were safe and protected and ratting on your neighbors to Fedra.
They put a gun to my head.
Here. Have I satisfied the necessary conditions for you to talk?
Kathleen, for God's sake. I delivered you.
held you in my hands. I never told them anything about your brother.
But Henry did. And we know that he's still in the city. And I think that you know that too. Where is he? You think I won't do it?
She's great in everything she does. If you're not watching Yellow Jackets, I've not started season 2, but season 1 is fantastic. I agree with you. There's not a whole lot to add there. I would say Pedro Pascal, Bella Ramsey, Joel, and Ellie are good. Pedro is kind of playing Pedro. I mean, is he the Mandalorian or is he Joel? It's kind of similar, but he's very good. He's easy on the eyes. Bella Ramsey, I think don't you think that was maybe more difficult for the casting director and the producers to find someone to kind of capture this role? I would think maybe it's difficult for her as well, because she's got the only other thing is this beautiful character and this relationship that she has with Joel, but she's up against a CGI character who's also, the voice acting in that role is very good.
Yeah.
That's why the game's so good, is that the performances that those actors give are better than 99% of all games ever made.
Well, I mean, Ashley Johnson is phenomenal, especially in part 2, Last of Us Part 2. She's just incredible.
Yeah. So anyway, that's kind of like honorable mention to Bella Ramsey for her performance as well.
I mean, my thing with Bella Ramsey and Pedro Pascal is that, we talk about, they're sticking to the beats of the game, but it's the game like on fast forward. I mean, it is the game like cruising at like a speed run kind of pace, right?
That's good. Yeah.
So the ability to get the emotion, the thing about the game is that you can build up the emotion between these two characters for a long time. I mean, you can be 10 hours in, and you fully sort of flesh out the relationship between Joel and Ellie. Here you have 7 episodes, 1 episode that's taken away from you with the Bill and Frank story. So you have 6 episodes. The first episode, they only meet at the end. So now you have 5 episodes to sync up this relationship and to get it where it needs to be in order for the climax to have the impact that it needs to have. And that's a tall order. It's a tall task. And I think they did a good job of it.
Is this really all they had to worry about? Boys, movies, deciding which shirt goes with which skirt. It's bizarre.
Listen,
Why are you here?
I came here to talk to you.
No, why are you still here? If you're gonna ditch me, ditch me.
What exactly did you hear?
I have to leave her, you have to take her. I stood up for you today because I thought...
I made this decision for your own good. You'll be way better off with Tommy. He knows the area better than I do.
Do you give a shit about me or not?
Of course I do.
Then what are you so afraid of? I'm not her, Maria told me about Sarah and...
No. Don't say another word.
I'm sorry about your daughter, Joel. But I have lost people too.
You have no idea what loss is.
Everybody I have cared for has either died or left me. Everybody except for you. So don't tell me that I'd be safe with somebody else, because the truth is, I would just be more scared.
Let's talk about some big ideas. I've got theology corner, which we kind of talked about a little bit already, because that was where I put in a lot of my Station 11.
Well, and also what you just said about just our existence on this planet.
Yeah.
Is not what does divine favor look like in that?
Yeah. I mean, your tomorrows are not guaranteed.
Yeah.
At the heart of this show, though, which differentiates it from Station 11, is this idea of what is the cost of love, right? So Craig Mazin has said in interviews that, his whole thing is the damage that love can do. And whenever he would talk about the concept of love, it was never like roses and rainbows and unicorns and beautiful things. It was always about like cost and punishment and sacrifice. And so it's about Joel's love for his daughter at the very beginning of the pandemic, or the outbreak and the fall of civilization, and then Joel's love for Ellie at the end of the show. And what does that love cost? Like, what does that first love cost Joel? And then what does his second love of Ellie cost the world, right? And it's just like, it's all sort of bound up in this idea that love can make things harder sometimes, a lot of times, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. That need, I like your note about the needs of the many versus needs of the few, because that works at almost every episode, where, I mean, you think about how in each case, it's people working for the needs of the many. Something happens and they become obsessed with the few or the one. In the case, maybe it's Joel and Ellie, or with Kathleen, it's the community, but then it's about justice for her brother, which is getting way out of hand. It's the same thing with Tommy, and why Tommy can't go with Joel, right? Because it's the community, right? They've got a good thing going. I can't sacrifice that for this.
He's got a family. I mean, that's
one thing. He's got a family. And then, in the course of most prominently, Joel's decision to quote unquote save Ellie at the end. And so I think that works. And there are other ways that it probably is fleshed out that I'm forgetting, but
well, and that idea, and this is, I don't know, I'll do moderate spoilers. So moderate spoilers for The Last of Us Part 2 is to say that cost of love, ultimately, it gets worse, right? It doesn't get better. Because it's a love that eventually leads a character to adopt vengeance, right? So like what we were talking about with Kathleen, like her love for her brother made her become this vengeful agent of destruction, like this sort of like, Castro-esque figure who overthrows the oppressor only to become another type of oppressor. And what eventually happens with Ellie and Joel is that because of Joel's decision, Ellie is going to have to make very hard choices going forward. And you see how love can ultimately become vengeance, which is the dark side of that. Right?
This is bouncing around a little bit, but when he makes the choice to save her in the series is when it really feels most like a video game.
Yeah.
Because he goes ham on everybody in that hospital.
Yeah. By the way,
it feels like you're playing it.
Yeah. By the way, that's a really hard part of the game. it's like so hard.
Yeah, that took me hours. Yeah, I had forgotten that, and I have nightmares of those hospital curtains.
Oh my God!
Trying to hide behind those hospital curtains, and
you have like a hit box that's like microscopic that you're just like aim. Oh my gosh, it's just so it's difficult. But no, I love this idea of like, just to pull back some theology here. where does this stuff get you, and what do these decisions ultimately lead to? And the phrase that's going through my head as we've come through Holy Week and Easter here recently, as we're recording this, is, forgive them, they know not what they do, right? I mean, at some point you've got to forgive Joel for his decision, because he doesn't know what he's doing, because he's blinded by the love of his lost child in order to claim his new child. And it's it's blindness. Let's talk a little industry just real quick. We've already discussed
a lot to discuss.
I don't want to go through the rebranding of Max. We've already kind of picked apart like HBO's identity the last time that we talked about an HBO show. But I am curious about this idea of video game IP kind of moving forward. So far this year, and as you've mentioned already, like it's a fairly young year, although I think this episode comes out in June. So I think it's like halfway through the year. We have two just ginormous video game property pop culture hits, which are The Last of Us on HBO and the Super Mario Brothers movie.
Which will probably still be in theaters in June.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's just going to make, every 8 to 12-year-old in the country is just seeing that movie over and over again on a loop. Like, it is nuts.
I'm ready to see it. I know it's not for me, but nostalgia,
Yeah, go figure.
I love Mario, all things Mario. So,
go figure. You make a movie for kids, and kids and parents buy tickets to movies. It's amazing. Yeah. It's almost as if like this is the model that Hollywood had forever, and they forgot about it. It's just incredible. So what is the state of video game IP? Strong. For the longest time, this was a joke. Like these movies were jokes. Yes. Resident Evil, the original Super Mario Brothers movie, like all of these things were terrible. And now we have two massive hits and a declining superhero genre. So does that mean that we've got more video game properties in our future?
Yes. And I am scrolling through a Time article at the moment that lists at least 20 quote unquote highly anticipated video game adaptations, a couple of which I knew about and a couple of which I didn't. And, look, this makes sense. Video games are massively popular. It's just like, and to me, it's like, in some cases, it's like literature. You have a built-in audience. You're adapting the story. You have a lot of the heavy lifting's already been done for you in terms of special effects and seeing how it would look on the screen potentially. The question, I think the better question, which you've asked already, is for what reason are you adapting this? Or and what have you found in this story or in that game that would make a good story written in a different way, told in a different way? Some of these I think are going to work better than others. The one that I knew about for a minute was God of War. Amazon Prime's ordered that to series, which could be exciting. The premise there of a man fighting the gods is give me the popcorn. Horizon Zero Dawn, another post-apocalyptic dystopian set narrative on Netflix. I'm going to skip over a couple. Tomb Raider, Assassin's Creed on Netflix, BioShock on Netflix. One that I was surprised by, and also very excited by, the hope is that, look, some of these could just be in development. Some could never see the light of day. But one of the games that I've enjoyed the most in the last year is a cooperative game called It Takes Two, which exists across most platforms, I think. And the cooperative gameplay is baked into the narrative. You cannot play the game unless you have a partner to play it with you. It's not like this tacked on thing to a single player adventure game. It's kind of like Honey, I Shrunk the Parents instead of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. And to get back to the real world and to save their marriage and rescue their daughter, this couple is shrunk down to doll size and must undertake all these challenges together. And them communicating with and working together effectively is integral to the game. And so anyway, it could make for a great action adventure comedy that looks like maybe Amazon Prime. But there's only a handful of games that I would get excited about seeing an adaptation. Some of these that I'm looking through on the list, and take it or leave it. But I think, to your point, the success of The Last of Us and then the box office bonanza that is Super Mario Brothers, they may be here to stay.
I don't mind a video game fad coming in. I mean, honestly, like, I'd watch a Castlevania movie. I'm okay with that. Like, it's
a great anime series on Netflix, by the way.
Exactly. I mean, I will say this. The video games themselves have gotten increasingly more and more cinematic. So The Last of Us made sense as a television show because it was already like storyboarded for you on the video game. I mean, you
true.
Just
Good point.
Translate one to the other. Now, I know that the Tom Holland Uncharted effort that came out earlier this year did not do well. But, like the things that you listed, BioShock, I'm thinking of things like Mass Effect and stuff like that. These are really story plot driven games. And they seem like no brainers. But then also, just thinking of the Mario end of things, putting a space marine on a planet full of Metroids seems like that's a no brainer of a movie concept too. I mean, that's already a proven concept with Alien. So it's exactly. I just like it. It seems like, yes. I think that video games are here to stay. I think the question is going to be, what's the quality of these types of movies going to be? And are we going to see up and coming directors like the Ryan Cooglers of the world and the Taika Waititis and stuff like that, making these types of movies the way that they made Marvel movies, leading up to this?
Well, I think you're right. It's another thing to consider, what is of value in each of these games. So you talked about The Last of Us being very cinematic in nature, but the story itself being deeply emotional and resonant. But then you think about games like, I like what you say about BioShock. I would put Horizon Zero Dawn in there, even though I didn't play a ton of it. But these are worlds that I want to explore more.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I want to see more of these weird animal machine hybrids in Horizon Zero Dawn. I want to understand better kind of the, fascist world of BioShock.
Right.
And how it came to be and what life is like in it. So asking those questions of what are the elements of value in these that we want to flesh out, in approaching these.
So there you go, folks. Settle in. The top 10 box office highest grossing movies of 2025 are going to be Zelda, Metroid, Castlevania, BioShock.
Well, as we record this, I am counting down the days until Tears of the Kingdom.
That's like a direct sequel. Zelda rarely does a direct sequel like that. I think Majora's Mask is like the last one.
Yeah.
All right, Ryan. I could geek out on games for the rest of the night, but I should probably get to bed at some point. So let's spin the wheel, see what our next show is.
Spinning the Wheel of Death.
That's right.
Oh, wait, the Wheel of TV. Sorry.
I'm going to solve. All right. Cornucopia cabinet.
Okay, Ryan, it's one of yours. Are you ready?
Yes.
The wheel has opted for your Amazon Prime pick, The Boys. For your Amazon Prime.
I don't know if the audience is ready for this one, buddy. Have you seen it?
I am caught up on The Boys. I am caught up.
I don't know how we're going to get into that, but we're going to get into it.
Well, my question for you is this.
NSFW.
Yeah, exactly. My question for you is this. Do you want to keep The Boys or do you want to change to something else that's also on Amazon?
I would have to think about that. I mean, what's on Amazon right now that the fact that
I don't know. Lord of the Rings nonsense or something.
Nope.
Yeah,
Nope.
I would say let's stick with The Boys because I think that's actually the best thing that Amazon has going. I think they've tapped into the best satire show on television.
Yeah, because it's playing off of what you talk about in almost every episode. the gluttony of
corporate greed,
superhero movies, and corporate greed, and manipulation, and exploitation, and oh goodness, and it is also bloody disgusting.
Oh, it is bloody disgusting in a very sort of cynical,
in
British
a wholesome way.
Yeah.
It's what would happen. It's what would happen if superheroes really existed.
Yeah. Yeah. And they were owned by Disney. Yeah.
Well,
all right, Ryan. So we will see you for The Boys next time. In the meantime, thanks for navigating the world of The Last of Us with me. I'm glad that we safely made it to Colorado and had no problems along the way. I don't know.
Got to hang out with the giraffes.
Yeah, exactly. We will see you next time.
Thanks.